So this book made me cry, like, more than once. Let's talk about it. Yesteryear is about this tradwife influencer who has to go back in time somehow and live in actual yesteryear. Very powerful premise. It has been the book club choice of every book club in the country, pretty much, and for good reason, because there's lots of good talking points. And I could probably do a video about every single topic in this book, but I'm not going to because I think there's been enough videos on this book at this point. I want to talk about the real tragedy at the heart of this kind of slightly humorous satirical novel. I say slightly humorous because some people do describe this book as humorous or like funny. I think they like to laugh at Natalie and her misfortune because she's not really a good person. And I agree, she's not really a good person. But I still didn't laugh at her misfortune. I actually just found it all really tragic. Now, I am going to be talking about spoilers, including the twist ending and everything. So if you've not read this book, click off, come back. You've had your warning. The real tragedy at the heart of this book is Natalie's beliefs and perceptions about motherhood and how it's just this unquestionable thing that she has to do. I'm going to start kind of at the beginning of her story and then get towards the end. So, obviously, the book opens with like the present day of her doing an interview and going through a normal day in her influencer life. And we see that she's got all of these kids. She seems loving towards them in this opening chapter, but we also see that there's two nannies, that the nannies do the bulk of the parenting off screen when she's not on camera doing like Instagram videos and pretending to be the perfect mother. We see her repeatedly filming shots with the children of picking up eggs from the chickens, having to do it over and over again, and we see how inauthentic it is. We also see how she films her children a lot. She kind of gets them to perform, makes them smile. And we see her oldest daughter, Clementine, who's about 15 at this point in the opening of the novel, push back and basically be like, no, like, get the camera out of my face, which Natalie's taken aback by. And we also see, I think in this opening chapter, or it might be later in the book, I can't remember, but we see her leave like one of her young children in the hot car while she goes into Target, and she kind of gets caught out by an old school friend doing this. And from this point, we can kind of see like she's not quite right. Like, it's not normal behavior to leave your kid in the car. It's very dangerous, especially in this kind of heat wave we're having right now. And it's just not the behavior of a mum that is not struggling with mental illness, depression, postpartum depression. And perhaps because people don't like Natalie, she's not a very good person, she's not a very nice person, she's a grifter, she's been very inauthentic in how she shows her life on social media. I think maybe some people miss that this is a red flag of illness. They think, yeah, of course she would do that because she's a horrible person. But I do think this is more than that. This is postpartum depression. Then the story takes us kind of back in time to the 1800s and also back to her life in college, and we flip between the two and we see her go through her life. And, she has a really hard time at school. She really looks down on and judges people that want to have a career, that don't want to get married young, that don't want to have children. She really gets obsessed with like her college roommate who, she sees as a pathetic figure who, yeah, she cares about following her career, but she's probably not going to be valued by her career. She's going to be an intern forever. Like, she's not going to be successful. Whereas I'm going to be a mother and a wife, and that's going to be really important. That's kind of how she frames it in her mind. And you do see that from a lot of that Republican, Christian, conservative side of the media. You see that as a talking point a lot of like, your kids will really love you, but your employer won't. And we see a lot of scaremongering about women following careers and losing their fertile years, which I think is important to think about if you want a family, but it's also not a reason to rush into things. And I think women shouldn't be shamed for wanting a career. And actually, you can do a bit of both, and everyone's got a different timeline. You can't have it all at the same time, but you can have it all. You can have a career, you can have motherhood and marriage. Sometimes luck comes into who you meet and stuff like that. So I don't think it's right to be shaming women for either way of life. I do think it's important to think about what you want and make a bit of a plan for that. And if you want kids young, date with a view to marry, but don't just do what Natalie does in this book and marry the first person that you meet that seems somewhat suitable. That's a recipe for disaster, as we see here. So Natalie really falls for this kind of argument, this Republican argument that you see a lot. And she drops out of uni. She alienates all of the potential friends she could have made. She marries this sort of idiot of a man who doesn't seem to know who he is either. And she gets pregnant. And she thinks, this is what she's supposed to do. So she's not got many misgivings about it. She doesn't have a very realistic knowledge or view of like pregnancy and birth and postpartum. So when she does have her baby and it's quite traumatic and it's quite gnarly, shall we say, and she really struggles postpartum with all of the wounds and all of the kind of horror of it, and with having a child and not connecting to the child. I really felt for her because no one really helped set her up for success in this at all. Is she partly to blame? Yes, but she's also kind of been brought up this way, kind of been conditioned to be this way. I think that scene where she sort of tries to go for a run postpartum and ends up tearing her stitches, and the nurse being like, "What the hell are you doing? You need to get back in bed. You shouldn't be doing this." And her continuing to do these kind of things anyway. I thought that was really hard to read about. I really didn't like that she felt pressured from herself and from other people to kind of try to get back out there and get back on the horse and not just take the time to heal like she needed. I felt bad that she didn't have the support that she needed with the baby, that she fell into this very obvious depression and didn't have adequate support to deal with it. I think it was really the start of like her psyche cracking. And her mum at this point was kind of supportive, but not in the best ways, not in the way that she could have been. She could have got her professional support. And maybe I'm misremembering, but I feel like the mum was encouraging her to go for a run and encouraging her to just get on with it. Maybe I'm misremembering because it's been a few weeks, but I think she was. And I know the mum changes for the better and sort of liberalizes in her like Christian values and changes her ways a lot. And her sister changes a lot as well and finds a nicer man and has a better time with her kids. But she and Natalie are quite damaged by her mum's perspective on things from early on. And the damage to Natalie, at least, is kind of really done by this point. And then Natalie just thinks she should just keep having children because that's really what you're supposed to do. And then she gets pressured by her father in law, this kind of Donald Trump kind of figure, because it looks good for his campaign to keep having children with Caleb. And she doesn't want to, but she's sort of trapped and powerless and ends up having all these kids just kind of out of duty. And she keeps having a bad time. She keeps having postnatal depression. I think she doesn't have it as strongly with some of the other kids, but she's certainly still struggling with very little support. She's trying to do it all on her own at first until she gets the nannies. And then once she becomes this influencer, yes, she now has money to pay for nannies, which helps make things easier, but she still has to make motherhood a big part of her brand, a big part of her personality. Being the perfect mum has to become this role that she plays, even though she's far from it. And actually, she's kind of a bad mum in a lot of ways. I think she even like films an at home water birth at some point for the money, for the platform, and her relationship to like motherhood. It's a performance. It's a performance for the audience of her platform, but it's also the performance of her values to her family, to her mum, to her father in law, to the whole world basically. But it's not how she authentically feels. Like if she really reflected and thought about it, she probably isn't someone that even wants kids and certainly doesn't want and shouldn't be having more than one. She doesn't have a nurturing bone in her body. She actually is quite business minded and savvy in some ways, as we see with the influencer career. And tragically, she probably would cope better being some kind of high powered career woman where you can be a bit Machiavellian and you can be a bit ruthless rather than pretending to be this really nurturing traditional figure, which doesn't suit her personality at all. And then we get the back in time portions, which, if you get to the end of the book, aren't really back in time. It's just that she's kind of been cancelled. I don't want to say psychotic break, but she certainly had a bit of a mental breakdown. Ended up assaulting a staff member, getting cancelled, deleting all her social media, And she, I guess at this point, becomes very delusional, potentially a bit psychotic and dissociative, certainly, in that she doesn't know what time it is. She doesn't remember how she got there. She kind of lives for like 10 plus years in this very authentic yesteryear style, almost to try and like vindicate herself, even though she's not posting it on a platform anymore, even though no one can see her. She's trying to like walk the talk essentially, but for like what reason at this point? It's kind of a delusional psychotic break essentially. And her husband, old Caleb, who is literally old Caleb because a lot of years has passed, it's really sickening to see him allow this to happen and go along with it, and how he almost gets off on the fact that she is now not the powerful one, that she is this actual traditional wife that he can hit and he can treat badly. Sick to see him like finally be attracted to her and get off on that and assault her multiple times. And she's got these new kids that she doesn't remember birthing, that she's very confused about. And eventually we find out that, the youngest actually has a learning difficulty because she tried to do a home birth in this yesteryear style. Went all quite poorly. She really needed medical intervention, and that led to a sort of developmental disability for this child. And the older child, who's sort of like her mum, kind of being a young caretaker of her, she's just forced to live this really wacky life for basically no good reason. And Natalie's oldest daughter, Clementine, eventually comes and takes the children away. And I got really emotional by this. One, by Clementine forgiving her mother and writing this memoir about her, sort of seeing that her mother was really ill and understanding that. I felt really emotional for the two children. The young one was really upset being taken away from her mother and everything she knew. She's got these learning difficulties. That was really sad. The older child, Maeve, I think her name was, she's just flabbergasted and seeing a car for the first time, seeing the outside world, the modern world for the first time. I felt a lot of empathy there because the kind of developmental effect that would have on a child would be really, really difficult. It's a bit like living in a cult and then stepping out and seeing that the real world isn't like that at all. That would be a really huge culture shock. And so I really felt for her the amount of suffering she would have to go through psychologically. That was really tragic and heartbreaking. And then Natalie herself, just how confused she was. We have a few chapters where she thinks she's pregnant, but she's actually gone through the menopause because she's in her 50s now. And this realization that she has gone through the menopause, that she can't have children anymore, that made me cry because this is a woman that's been kind of trapped into having children by herself, but also by her father in law. And she's sort of been imprisoned by this duty to just repeatedly have children. And we forget she really was trapped in this marriage. She didn't have her own money, not until she started the social media brand and started putting money away. But she couldn't divorce him, she would have lost everything. This is the danger of not having your own life and your own career and just being a housewife, because yeah, if you've got a healthy marriage and there's not any abuse going on, that can be fine. But if you are in an abusive situation, you can really easily get trapped. And Natalie really gets trapped by the children and by the lack of career skill and also financial stability, financial independence from her husband. So, this moment where she realizes that it's over, that she's in the menopause, that she can't have children anymore, and the grief that comes with that, but also like the freedom of you don't have to do it anymore. I think that just hit me, and the emotions hit me, and I cried. And then I cried again when the kids got taken away. And then I'm pretty sure, maybe I'm forgetting, but she ended up in prison at the end for basically child abuse and quite horrendous child neglect. I think she does, and then she gets interviewed by Rena, doesn't she? And even in this moment, she's still thinking herself better than Rena, even though Rena's like had this really successful career. I think she's married with a kid as well at that point, so it's not like she's had to really give anything up. Maybe I'm misremembering, but Natalie's literally in prison with nothing and still got that quite delusional attitude. She's not really in touch with reality. Pretty tragic, pretty sad. So that's why I cried at this book, and I rated it 5 stars, and I thought it was really powerful. Maybe there are other aspects, other themes that you can critique a bit harsher, and maybe that's why people rated it a bit lower for some of those things. But just on that theme alone, I thought it was handled really well. I thought it was heartbreaking, and I think it's a topic that people really need to take seriously because motherhood is no joke, and mothers need a lot of support. And a lot of the suffering of these children could have been prevented with like proper mental health care early on and with less external kind of indoctrination in our childhood as well. When these things don't happen, the trauma and the damage really gets passed down from kind of mother to child. Her mother kind of messed her and her sister up. She's messed up all her children. Her mother's broken out of the cycle, and her sister's now broken out of the cycle. Natalie's very much in it, and hopefully, these kids, some of them will break out of the cycle. But her sons, I mean, her sons very much still seem to be in quite a toxic place because they were maintaining the delusion. Clementine's in a healthy place. Hopefully, Maeve and the other girls get out of it and don't fall into similar toxic patterns. But yeah, it's a book, so I guess I'll just pretend that they did. Let me know your thoughts on Yesteryear. What do you think of my analysis of that topic in particular? Have I missed anything? Let me know in the comments. We can have a conversation. And if you like this video, subscribe for more bookish videos. I talk about reading and writing. Sometimes I do deep dives into books like this. So subscribe and tune in for more. And go and follow me on Instagram as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!